All right, everybody, it's the Combatcast, and we are live, and we are at it, and we are going to get started here. And Joe got me set up here with something. We're getting rid of that. All right, so, all right, folks, we are live. We're going to talk Ngannou and Fury today. We're going to talk this weekend's fight night with Almeida versus Lewis. Lewis is got a speeding ticket the other day. Hopefully,
you could call it that.
Yeah, he went over. He went over the speed a little bit. Why don't you tell people what we got coming up in the next few weeks?
All right, November 11th. It's not going to be Jones versus Miocic anymore. It is going to be UFC 295. Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich for the. I guess they're calling it the interim belt, but we all know this is the real belt, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And then after that, November 18th, UFC Fight Night, Allen versus Craig, good middleweight matchup. And then the end of the month, November 25th, no UFC. So we're going to be coming at you with the PFL 2023 season championships. A lot of title fights going on that night.
Dude, the PFL. We're going to talk about that, I think, when we talk about our first segment today. And our first segment, we're talking about what went down this past Saturday. Fury versus Ngannou. Everybody, we all thought this was going to go a certain way. We all had this theory of what could possibly happen. Nobody had it predicted the way this was going to go down. No effing way. I'm at Mohegan Sun getting ready to watch AEW. First off, I tried to get this a certain way. I didn't get it. And I'm like thinking this thing starts at 2 p.m. I don't have to be at Mohegan Sun until 6:30. No worries. I ended up not getting it, which worked out for the best because the fucking thing didn't start till like a little after 6.
Yeah, it was way after 5, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it had to because I was in that building around 7, and matches were starting, and that fight was just finishing up around that time, I think. So, anyway, that's wild. This is crazy. We're going to talk about it. Chevy, I watched a lot of highlights of this. I pretty much know it down, but you got to watch the actual fight. We're going to talk about what we think should be next for Francis. And I think that's the most interesting thing about this whole thing. But also, what a damn performance, man. Did you think he won the fight? Well, what I saw, it was a close fight, but I think I've heard people say this. On a fight, like what looked like an actual fight, Francis won the fight. But by round, how'd you see it?
Yeah, it was tough. So when I had watched it, obviously I did not think the fight was going to go the distance in any facet. So I wasn't really scoring it.
Yeah.
But I would say, and I haven't heard this take from anyone really, in boxing scoring, I would give the fight to Fury. Yeah. And in MMA scoring, where we judge damage, not necessarily volume of punches, I would absolutely give the fight to Ngannou. So I think this falls under the range of not a robbery. It could have went either way for sure. I lean toward Francis, but I'm also very biased in this situation. So, and I recognize that bias. So tough fight to call. I would have gave it to Francis, but I understand in boxing why they would have gave it to Tyson. So, but that Tyson did not look like the Tyson that we saw against Deontay Wilder. That can be chalked up to so many things.
Right.
Whether it be oversight of Francis, he's really looked past him, which he said he did a 12-week camp, his longest camp ever for this. Could be just chalked up to Francis's skill, because he did show he had a lot of skill in there that nobody thought he was going to have. So
lack of film to study on this man.
Yeah. He's never been in a professional boxing match ever. And what you see in MMA is just annihilation. And that's not what he went out there and did. He fought very intelligent. I was super impressed with his composure, his cardio for not being in there for like 18 months. And obviously the moment, you would think the vastness of the moment. I know you didn't really get to watch it, but the whole
Search me.
Yeah, the whole Saudi like production was so
Right.
crazy and it was so big and such a big thing, and they just kept showing how many stars were there and all this, and the moment was so big, and Francis handled it so well, and just very, very impressed.
Yeah, list of MMA stars, boxing stars, Vince McMahon, Eminem. Like it was just
Ronaldo,
soccer. Yeah, so many. Michael Bisping was talking on his podcast that he actually got an invite, but he was getting ready to go to Brazil. But he said it would have been a nice little payday, and he just had to turn it down. And I thought, my God, they wanted everybody for this, and they have so much money. There's no way this doesn't happen without Saudi Arabia. Whether people are happy about that or not, it's just a fact of life. Just know that that's the money they provided for this spectacle. Like this doesn't go down any other way.
Right, they definitely lost money on this, but they're trying to build something there, so that's an investment. But in this, production, they absolutely lost money. It was huge.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, I just want to say before we getting to what's next, the big winners of this, Francis, even though he didn't win the fight in terms of getting a decision, they're the big winners, I think, here. PFL, like a motherfucker, they became big winners now. They have the biggest star in heavyweight right now, you could argue, in their promotion.
But also,
I know you're
going to be a big loss because he might not fight in MMA ever again now. He might just be a boxer.
For the time,
he's going to make all the money.
For the time being, we're going to call this a win for them because there's going to be light shined on that. But that's an interesting point. That is an interesting point. We'll talk about that a little bit. Also, people are going to say this looks bad for boxing. I'm going to take a different point. I see where they're coming from, but this is also a win because now when Francis fights again, there's going to be a lot more intrigue from a crossover point too. You're going to have people on the MMA side who are like, hey, I think now people who didn't believe are going to give Francis a shot. And by the way, there's no guarantee this is going to be the same result. We are still talking about a novice who had an amazing performance, but like we always say in MMA, it's one fight, it's one night, you never know. So, what should be next, I guess? Boxing for me. No doubt. I hope he does do an MMA bout. I hope he does able to do both. But to me, if we're not doing Fury, which I don't think we're going to get that, I think Deontay Wilder is the name I keep hearing. And I think that's the fight that makes the most sense because they're both hard hitters. And I don't know technically who's the better boxer at this point, which is damn crazy to say because Wilder has never been an overly polished boxer. And Francis was surprisingly polished for his first fight.
Yeah, that's absolutely the fight I want to see next, too. I think people were wondering if Francis's power was going to translate to those 10-ounce gloves, and obviously it did. He was able to knock Fury down. And we all know what Wilder did in that first fight with Fury, too. And also, he's finished every guy he's fought. He went the distance in one fight, and then he got that one back and finished that guy in the rematch. So, other than Fury, obviously. So, super exciting fight. For all the reasons you said, technically, he's the least experienced boxer, so it's the most even playing field, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, Anthony Joshua would be a fun spectacle too. You do that in the UK. He's just the golden goose right now, I think. Like if you're Joshua or you're Wilder, like you want this fight because here's a guy who not only has the MMA fans talking as the guy who's the lineal UFC heavyweight champion, he just arguably beat Tyson Fury, and in most people's eyes did, but he's only had one fight still. So as a boxer, this guy's a cash cow, and you want to take that fight. You want to take that calculated risk and see if, hey, maybe I can't knock him out, but maybe I can outbox him for 12 rounds,
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see that Wilder fight because he's the most independent guy. So it's going to take the least amount of negotiating with 100 different people on each person's team or whatever, as opposed to like the AJ fight. So I think we'll see that fight. I hope we do. I'm looking forward to that. And like you were saying, this could be a win for boxing as well.
Sure.
Just in the fact that it's going to open the door for a lot of other big crossover fights. You're going to see, now that an MMA guy finally won one of these in a legit way, or, won, quote unquote, you're going to see some other crossover fights, although at these lower weight classes, like I'm thinking about Sean O'Malley versus Tank. Yeah, Davis. Like, the fight is interesting, but I would still imagine the boxer demolishes the MMA fighter. And at the smaller weight classes, technique is so much more important than, at the heavyweight weight class, because Francis can get by with basically just his power. That won't work at the lower weight classes. So I think it's good for boxing because it'll bring some of the smaller guys over in interest, and they'll probably win all of those lighter weight fights.
For sure. This is unique. I think the negative, I guess, if there's one loss, I think that people are talking about, it's the current heavyweight division. A lot of people are looking at like the current heavyweight division in boxing, maybe not as great as yesteryear. And that's how this is getting exposed by a guy who's never had a pro fight to be able to do this. Clearly, Francis has had a lot more boxing training than he probably let people on over the years. He's been doing this on the side, but it's still, it's wild. It's a fever dream. It's nuts to think that this happened the way it did. A couple other interesting points too. I did hear a rumor that somebody said that Deontay Wilder has been training a little MMA and he's seriously considering doing MMA against Francis. If anyone's going to do it, I would not be surprised if it's Deontay. I don't see that happening. If I was his management team, I would not tell him to do that. But given the way Deontay is and that he had those losses to Fury, I could see him doing it. Out of all the boxers, I think he's the one most likely to cross over. But I will say this. Eric Nixon, I think his name is, with Elite. First off, again, we already talked about with Strickland. Now more than ever, these guys got to be in talk for Trainer of the Year.
Absolutely. Cannot lose at this point.
No, for sure. It's got to be a shoo-in. And he had said something very funny, because Israel, we didn't talk about this, Israel Adesanya and Kamaru Usman come out with Francis here.
That was so cool.
So cool. And Adesanya, Eric had talked about how him and Adesanya actually were always very cordial with each other. And Adesanya joked with him. He said, "You would save that man's life," talking about Strickland, because you were reading my reads. You knew what I was going to do. And I guess they had a little thing, and I'll circle this back to Wilder. You see where I'm getting with this. They had a little thing where they were sitting down. Eric was next to Izzy, and when Tyson and Francis are fighting, and Izzy said, "Do you see what I see?" And Eric said, "Leg kicks for days. Leg kicks for days." And I just bring that up because Wilder does not have the biggest legs in the world, as much as that guy loves to hit. And I can legit see his leg getting smashed by a Francis leg kick. It would not be good.
Well, I think in the broadcast I was watching anyway, I had Kenny Florian in the podcast, and he pointed that too, how none of these boxers can cross over because they couldn't take one leg kick. Right. If you've never taken one, you don't understand the kind of damage that inflicts, and it'll stop you in your tracks. So, yeah, I've heard, as far as Wilder and Francis, I heard maybe they might do some sort of mixed rules thing. So right. I didn't hear the extent of what that would be, but I would assume it involves some sort of leg kicks. So, or, you know, a clinching or something, regardless of which, it's all bad news for Wilder. So boxing is going to be tough enough for him, I think. So, but I'm looking forward to it. I want to see whatever it is. I want to see it all.
And that's, I just want to say one other thing, because there's so many scenarios of this. With Bellator MMA, essentially, we know they're going under, and PFL, possibly getting them or acquiring that. There has been talk that some of Bellator stars might come over. You could do, if there's nobody to book a boxing match right away, and Francis does want to do MMA fight, you could easily do Ryan Bader for his Bellator MMA title, a wrestler, but let's be honest, you're not taking Francis down. But I'm just saying, you could do a gimmick. There's all kinds of fights. And here's the thing, too. When Francis cross-training and doing boxing a little more, I would say he's one of the most compelling stars right now, not only because of his story and who he is. I think he has a legitimate chance of winning, but I think there's a legitimate chance of losing right now because there's all these little X factors that are working for and against him. And it just makes for a real interesting stew right now. And I'm on board. To me, whatever Francis does next, he's the most compelling guy in combat sports, not related and not involved with the UFC.
Right. He's 37 years old. So whatever he's going to get done, I think we're going to see a lot of content out of him quickly in like the next few years because, he's not getting any younger. So, but you're saying is the most compelling fighter outside the UFC. Let's circle that back to Dana White. Has he ever dropped the ball so bad as letting Francis go? Obviously, at the time, it seemed like a very good idea because nobody thought Francis could win. But think of how great it would have been if the UFC had been, on board with Francis and then able to co-promote this, and then he fights John Jones, and he's really the baddest man on the planet, and what could have been. Not saying that fight can't happen, if there's some sort of PFL promotion, because
they're for it.
Of course they are. And the UFC has always been the A side in these situations, so there's been no cause for them to go to the table in these kind of crossover things. But Francis has got to be the A side at this point. So
got to be the A side.
The only possibility I think of ever seeing a crossover fight is right now.
And if you're the UFC, you're probably confident still with a guy like John Jones, given his skill set, what he brings to the table,
and USADA going away.
So you probably you're probably not afraid to lose on that. You might take that if there's a man. I can see where they're not going to do it. It's just the way they are. But if ever there was a time that things get done, you see Francis pull off a few more boxing fights. If things starts, he's getting enough buzz. This guy, if he has it, he's already making an argument for it, but he may go down as the greatest combat sports heavyweight of all time by the time he's done.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to argue with what he's done currently. So,
yeah, he's
very close.
All right. Well, there's one guy that could probably argue with him, and that's Derrick Lewis. And he's fighting Almeida this weekend. I'm going to do this a little out of order, Chevy, just because I brought this picture up. We will talk about the main event first. And this is an interesting fight. We'll see what happens because, like we were saying, Derrick got arrested, it looks like, for
reckless driving.
Reckless driving?
Like 130 or something like that in a 50-mile-an-hour zone in his Lamborghini.
So that's insane. Hopefully, just a bad day, and Derrick will be fine.
They make cuffs big enough to go around those wrists?
I don't know. Derrick Lewis, who holds a win over Francis Ngannou, folks, by the way. Big fight this weekend. By the way, when Derrick Lewis fights, you think we'll see anything with Francis in that fight package of him getting his hand raised? It's a but,
yeah, I don't know.
Watch him dice up, Gets it.
That was another thing, going back to the Francis thing, is they were like able to show UFC things because it was an ESPN pay-per-view, and ESPN really owns all that stuff. So I bet that really burned Dana's butter,
Big winner, ESPN. Yeah. Well, all right. So this fight, tell us what we got here, Chevy.
So we got Jailton Almeida, who is a minus 470, by the way, super disrespectful, versus Derrick the Black Beast Lewis.
Yeah, I got to favor Almeida in this one. I mean, all right, 19-2, 7 KOs, 12 subs. This man, like he talk about Derrick Lewis doesn't like to go to decision. Neither does Almeida. All right. Lewis is 27-11-1, 22 KOs, 1 sub, 4 decision. He's coming off a fantastic win. He's got a lot of momentum outside of what just happened in his personal life here. But I just think Almeida is too versatile. I think he's too well-rounded. Derrick Lewis has shown, though, that he's in shape in his last few fights. And with that kind of power, you never know. So, but barring a crazy knockout, I like Almeida here, and I like him by submission. I think he's going to find a way to get the back, and I think he'll tap out Derrick in round 2.
Yeah, Haltion's well-rounded, like you said, but he should not test his stand-up with the KO king of the UFC. He should keep working takedowns, laying ground and pound, because Derrick Lewis does not like to get punched. He'll give up his back, and then Haltion can sink in a choke. But Derrick is the king of not believing in jiu-jitsu, and somebody will be on top of him, and it looks like they're holding him down, and he just stands up because he's the Black Beast. So he has that ability, and that can be frustrating to jiu-jitsu guys. So if he frustrates him and he carries power into round 5, he can knock him out at any second. So Derrick just needs to stay patient, time his shots for when Haltion goes in for takedowns. He only has to land one knee or uppercut like he did against Curtis Blades when he landed that devastating uppercut, stopping the takedown. So,
Derrick.
I'm going to go with Derrick. Yeah, just because he only needs one punch to stop it, and he's proven that he can just stand up in jiu-jitsu scenarios that a lot of guys can't. So, I'm going to go with Derrick. I'll say catches him in round 3, knockout.
All right. Extra bonus points here today for Randy Oscar. Do you think anyone will buy Bellator?
If anyone's going to, I'm going to say PFL, because they're the only one that has been in talks.
Right. And it'll be probably factored by the Saudi money. It looks like to be sponsoring the PFL. So you have that money coming in. So that makes sense. All right, let's jump to the co-main event here. Chevy, what do we got?
Gabriel Bonfim versus Nicolas Dalby. Also, another giant favorite on this fight. Bonfim is minus 520.
I can see why.
Yeah, very big prospect coming in.
Yeah, 15-0, 3 KOs, 12 subs. Another man who's never gone the distance. But Nicolas Dalby, I mean, this is a guy who's been around, in terms of the UFC, and has had big fights. This guy's 22-4-1. He's got 6 KOs, 4 subs, 12 decisions. So he's a guy that could definitely play spoiler here. But I'm thinking Gabriel is probably going to get this done. I think he's the hot prospect. They put him in a fight that they probably think he can win. So I'm going to go Gabriel. I'm going to go just like I did last time. Submission, round 2.
Yeah, like you're saying, Dalby supposed to be a lamb for slaughter here. This is very much, this whole card really is very much a showcase for Brazilian fighters, and he would be, the big time showcase, I think. He has the 100% finish rate, but Dalby's never been finished. But he's 38 now, so if he's going to get finished, now's the time it's going to start happening. So, I think the UFC knows what they're doing here. Good test for Gabriel, but I like him for a submission. I'm going to go round 1 submission for him.
All right, folks.
He hasn't been outside round 1 in the UFC yet. So,
all right, folks. This is going to be this is the card this weekend for the main and co-main event. Chevy, tell people we got coming up one more time.
All right, November 11th, UFC 295, new main event. It will be Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich. Excellent co-main event with Prohaska and Potan for the light heavyweight belt too. And then November 18th, UFC Fight Night, Allen versus Craig. Great middleweight matchup. And then November 25th, no UFC, so we will be discussing PFL 2023 season champion.